It's a lot different than you guys will down here in Pennsylvania. So, but our basics are the same. There's all those fundamentals, right? And if you can understand, if you can see what I'm doing and understand how I'm doing it and using these fundamentals, maybe you can bring back some of that to your own apiaries and maybe, you know, add to your overall general knowledge of beekeeping. So you'll give me a 5-minute warning, hey, and just throw a shoe at me. Because once I start beekeeping, sometimes I won't stop just trying to make you guys. So my name's Ian Stepler, for anybody who doesn't know, and I'm married to Sandy. Sandy's over here. We have a family of 5, and we're just kind of joking yesterday, sitting in the airport on Valentine's Day. It's kind of nice because it's quiet.
Yeah.
I have my diploma in agriculture, and that's where I got my introduction to beekeeping. I'll talk a little bit about that in one of the breakout sessions here later on this afternoon. I'm a director of the Manitoba Beekeepers Association. I'm the vice president. I'm also the owner-manager president of our family farm, and I'm the farm's apiarist. So Miami, nobody really knows where Miami is. It's right down here, close to North Dakota. We're about 20 miles off the border. Miami's a little flatland community. Great. This used to be all covered in water way back when, called Lake Agassiz. So Miami is on the bottom of it. It's kind of like lake bottom, so it's as flat as a pancake. It's heavy land right down in here. Our farm is just up on top. Miami's just on the bottom of the escarpment, the shore of ancient Lake Agassiz. So we're kind of like up in the hills. So our farm is very hilly, and you can kind of, in a combine here, you can kind of see the hills, and they roll down the escarpment down to the flats around Miami. So our farm is very diverse with our landscape. We farm 3,300 acres of grain land. We look after like wheat and canola and corn and soybeans, and we grow our own silage and feed grains and such. And because of our diverse nature of our farm, we practice a lot of conservation practices. Primarily, we're a cattle farm. We have, this year we're calving 650 cows, and we're about 400 calved out now. So it's really nice to get away from all that madness to come here, talk some bees. We've been in the business for, almost 50 years now. We just had a heifer sale before Christmas, where we sell select heifer stock, and we're going to have a bull sale coming up here in March. We sell animals right across Canada, from BC to Nova Scotia. We sell down in the States here, into Mexico. We have semen rights in New Zealand, in Australia, walking animals in Ukraine and Kazakhstan. So we're pretty influential in the cattle business throughout the world, I guess you can argue. For me, I look after the honey farm. We have 1,500 hives, and we're primarily honey producers. We don't have any pollination opportunities in our area, so we focus primarily on honey production. We produce roughly 250 to 300,000 pounds of honey annually, and to get that, I hire up to 7 local employees from Miami to help me out, bring all that workload in. I'm a member of Bee Made Honey, which is a cooperative. It's a Western Canadian honey co-op, which we pack our own 100% Canadian honey, and we supply we pack, I think it's 25 million pounds, and we supply all the major chains right across Canada, so it's a good place to sell honey. So today in this talk, I kind of want to step you through my honey farm, just kind of walk you through, and just kind of bring you a management perspective of a Canadian paired beekeeper. So I have all my bees inside right now. A lot of guys winter their hives inside. Not everybody, we have guys that winter outdoors also. But generally we bring them in just to get them out of that cold winter. Primarily that wind. That wind is really tough on hives. So long, these outdoor hives, you wrap them up, you get them covered in snow. They winter really well, but we're just losing more and more bee yards. So it's a lot easier to move our hives inside into a climate-controlled building. I have 1,500, I kind of double this winter room as my hot room too. So I move them all inside, stack them up 6 high to the ceiling, and turn off the lights. I keep this room about 4 degrees Celsius in there. Lights out, the hives stay nice and tight in their boxes. I keep them in there till about March. Move them in November, and we take them out end of March. So as spring approaches, the indoor temperature starts to increase because I can't regulate the indoor temperature with the incoming air coming in. So the bees start to get anxious. And just like any of us, when we're going through a long, cold winter, we smell that fresh spirit of spring and we just want to get outside, right? Like our kids, they just want to get outside. Same with the bees, they can smell that spirit, that freshness, and they want to get outside. So they usually tell you when they want to get out. And right here, you can kind of see their beard. They're starting to get anxious. They want to get out. So I got to be very careful not to leave them inside for too long, for too warm, because they'll start bearding out and they'll start flying out. Just get higher attrition that way. So we try to move them out when spring approaches. And I do everything with forklifts and pallets. I don't lift boxes anymore. I don't lift, so everything's on pallets and bee trucks and such. And I try to move my hives out at night. And one of the reasons for that is they've been cooped up inside for about 5 months, and they see that light and they want to fly, right? So by moving them out at night, I can keep them tucked away in their box, settle them down into their yards, and then they can wait for morning to take their first flight. The other reason why I do it is because as spring approaches, it gets really muddy. So as the night falls on us, the frost will sit back down into the ground and I can walk in frost. I'm not always getting stuck all the time. So the first flight, once we get them all out, the bees are able to get out and do their cleansing flight. So you got to appreciate that these guys have been inside that winter shed for 5 months in confinement. And we set them out. This is just, this video I wanted to show you here. This one particular year, it was too wet, I couldn't access my spring yards. So I usually have like 5 or 6 different yards I put 200 hives down into. But this, I couldn't get to those yards, so I had to put them all down into this gravel pit. So I have 1,500 hives set down into this gravel pit here, and there are literally hundreds of thousands of bees up in the air taking their first flight. And there is bee poop everywhere. It's like a literal shitstorm going on. That's a bit of the cowboy coming out of me, but it is just an awe-inspiring spectacle that goes on at this point in time. So they get out, and it takes them about 2 or 3 days to actually relieve themselves, to get all the poop out of their guts as they're taking that flight. So we got to leave them alone because it's just too messy. So we set them down, we let them fly for a couple of days before we can start our work. So we go through and we're assessing with feed. We're going through for emergency feed. They've been inside for 5 months, so we've got to target those big ones that are on the verge of starvation, and we've got to get some food onto them. So that's the first job. This graph, I just love this. It's come from Randy Oliver. I know you guys had him out here last year. He put this together with a data set from a fellow back in Manitoba, Lloyd Harris, and what Lloyd did as he went through the colony, and he counted the brood, and every 12 days he counted the bees that were emerging within the hive, and every 12 days he'd count the painted bees and then he'd paint new ones. It's just an incredible task. And with that huge data set, Randy took and did what Randy does best. He puts it into a graph, which makes a lot of sense. I can just look at this for hours on end because it tells you everything that's going on. It tells you the size of your hive. It tells you your brood line, what's going on within your colony throughout the year. It's telling you how old those bees are within the year. So I'm moving the colonies out right here, right at the end of March. So you can kind of notice once these guys set up their nest, that nest stays pretty static in size. As these bees get older, as the older ones die off, they rear some new brood. So they keep that hive maintained just perfectly through until I set them out here. Right at this time, we're going around supplemental feeding. So I have some dry feed out for this before the trees come out in bloom. So I just want to energize that nest with protein you know, I'm putting patties down, so I just want to jolt that nest protein just to excite that queen, just to, you know, convince those bees to start actively laying like a lot of bees. And I'm stimulating with some feeding. So here I'm open feeding. I don't have too many neighbors around me, which is nice, so I can participate in open feeding, which is very, very natural way of feeding bees. Any beekeepers around me, I have to, you know, put pails out on the colonies. But I just want to energize that nest. I just want to get that queen going before those trees come up. So my first apiary assessment, I'm going through, I'm tipping back these colonies. I just grab them, tip them back, and basically what I'm doing is I'm just trying to figure out the colonies that are needing feed, like right now, these colonies that are going on starvation. At the same time I'm doing that, I'm going through and I'm providing an apiary assessment. Okay? I do a lot of measurements on the growth of my colonies. In one way, and the reason why I do that is so I can track my queens. I have too many colonies. I can't dig down into every colony. I can't figure out what she's doing in there without assessing them. So what I do is I progressively measure the growth of the colony throughout the spring to help tell me what's going on inside that nest. So as I'm going through the emergency assessments, emergency feeding, I'm going through assessments. The strong ones I mark with blue, the 8 to 10 framers, I call them box of bees. And the medium ones I mark them with a gray tag. These are mediums here. And the weak ones I mark like a red tag, just so I get a little bit more attention. And I always assess my colonies from underneath, because a beehive can't lie to you underneath. You pop a lid, you look down, those bees are coming up, they'll show you 8 frames of bees up on top. This is a great hive. But you tip them back, and I'm counting, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4 frames of bees here. They're stretching down, right? So this is the defined nest here. They won't lie to you underneath. It's just a more accurate way to measure your bees. So we're going through, we're feeding, we're assessing, we're calling out the dead ones, we're monitoring for disease, and we treat accordingly. So as I was saying, the colony assessments are a quick way to determine our queen vigor and a quick way to monitor your apiary to promote those strong hives and then target those failing ones. And it's just a way that you can also act on those failure hives to salvage them before they either die off, or these failing hives, they just cost you money. So I'm going through in the spring, my first assessment. So we're looking through 2 colonies here, just for an example. This is a 9-frame winter colony with a vigorous queen, a 9-frame colony with a failed queen. And the 2 lines, if you want to pay attention, are the brood line here, and then the bee population. Forget about all this other information here, it's not important right now. So the first assessment, we're coming through, and the colony set themselves up just brilliantly through the winter. Good queens built this terrific winter nest. So they sailed through winter, they're doing very well. They assess quite the same. But through the spring, that colony on this side is failing for whatever reason. They just give up, it's failing. So it's not throwing the same brood nest out. So on my second assessment, about a month later, we start to see a lag. So this one's progressing, this one's just staying stagnant. Through this assessment, it's a hard time to be able to pick out that colony as it's failing. If you can figure that out. You put a new queen in there and you salvage that colony. The third assessment, during my spring split, this is where you catch them. This one's giving me a full split. It's making me a lot of money. I'm going to send this into honey flow and produce a lot of honey. This one is not giving me a split. It's staying stagnant. And if we don't act on this guy, they're not only they're not going to produce us honey, but we're going to dump a pile of inputs into these guys. They're actually going to cost us. So we want to be able to target those colonies and pull them out of our apiary and put something in that spot that's going to make us money, right? So we target these colonies and we take them back, and we can either requeen them if you buy a queen, or requeen them, or you can salvage them into nukes, and that's what I typically do. I'll talk more about that in my queen rearing presentation. And you take these nukes, you take these colonies, you dump them into nukes, you take them right to the beginning and throw a queen cell just to rejuvenate that nest. Get that colony making money again. So as we're calling out the equipment, it's very important that we're going through and we scrape and clean up everything. All the frames get scraped up. Visually inspecting for disease, that's my job. I'm training Carrie, she's working in the farm, she's been here for quite a while, so she can identify some of the brood diseases and the dead comb now. So we're always looking for disease and we're always calling out if we find anything like that. We're sorting into piles. So we scrape up, clean up all this equipment, make it look pretty again. We put them into piles that are empty, piles of empty, piles of pollen, and piles of honey. And that just tells me how much comb resource I have available at hand.
That's what we need to do.
And we take that comb and we're sorting them into, I call them my split boxes. So we take the honey, we take the pollen, and we take the empties, and we all sort them into these boxes being ready to put on top of our singles that are just exploding in growth to be able to grow up into. So I set these boxes up very specifically, very intentionally. I put 2 foundation on the outside, so 2 foundation here, 2 foundation here. I put a honey frame, and then the 4 center ones are pollen and empty frames. Okay, so it's very important. There's 2 foundation each side, 2 honey, 2 honeys for the food, and then the pollen and the empty are on the inside. So we're setting our hives out end of March. Right here is an important time for that beehive. It's what I call like that flip. The nest flips from the winter nest into the spring nest, right? Taking all those old winter bees, rejuvenating that nest into a young, thriving spring nest. And then they go into expansion mode. So right at this point in time, these long-lived bees, they're sailing through winter. We set them outside and they instantly turn into summer-lived bees. Now they only have 3 or 4 weeks to live. And they dedicate all their time and resources on building that colony to be able to develop that brood out before they die off. It's almost like they pass on a piece of them to their brood nest. And by doing that, that time clock starts just like that. They're making that spring nest. Extremely important point of time. So once they flip over, we get into that expansion mode. You can see this hive is growing exponentially. That brood nest is almost straight up. Look at the population. It's just booming in growth. So this is my first assessment. This is my second assessment. And so we're going through and we're tipping back these colonies again just to observe what's going on within the apiary. So I'm tipping back these colonies, and as they're marked in blues, these boxes of bees, I'm looking at these huge hives. These guys instantly get a second, right? Those split boxes I made up earlier, we slap a second on them, just like right there. These big boxes of bees. Those mediums, we tip back, we're looking for progression. We're looking for, if they're, maybe they've developed into a box of bees, and we're going to promote them. But if not, we just leave them in singles. We're going to go back through and we'll equalize all those mediums, give and take some brood back and forth, inspect that brood nest. Why are they not boxed of bees, And all those weak ones, we go through and we try to salvage everything we can. We just inspect to see what's the reason why it's only 3 frames. A small colony doesn't necessarily mean a poor colony. A small colony just means there are circumstances that has resulted in it being small. So if it's small, it could thrive itself into a big moneymaker. So we've got to be able to identify the ones that are failing and the ones that are, we've got to identify the ones that are failing and identify the ones that are going to produce for you. Let's do our assessments. So through the spring, up in Manitoba, it's cold all the time. And we're managing cold, variable spring conditions. And once these hives get up into the trees and start brooding, I keep them tight. I keep them tight in my boxes. It's just like I think a lot of you would recognize hives that are kept in smaller spaces just seem to thrive. They just seem to do better. So I do that for my entire apiary. I keep them as tight as I can. I have them utilize pretty much all the space within that brood nest. I'm not worried about swarming. This is this point in time when they're flipping their nest into that spring nest. They're focused on just rejuvenating that nest. So I make sure they use all that space. I keep them tight. I give them, they have the honey, they have I'm feeding them at the same time. They have all the resources they need. They bring in this pole and they lay out these massive frames of brood. They're about to hatch. I think it's like 1 frame of brood to 3 frames of bees. When that emerges, it's going to turn into 3 frames of bees. So in the second assessment, I'm walking the line on to when those frames are going to hatch. And I have to make sure I have space available. But I'm very, very specific when I put my extra space on. If it's cold and snowy and just terrible conditions, and I slap a second box up on top, I just completely change the dynamics of that colony within that nest. And it kind of it'll shock them if it's cold, and they just kind of sit back, and it just adds stress. And I've years that I've put space on top and it's too cold, adds stress, and they'll be kicking chalk brood out that front for the next 3 weeks. It's just like, ah. So last year was a cold spring. I'm going through, these colonies are big, they need space. It's cold, I can't put it on top. So a trick that you can do is you can put that space underneath. So it just gives a place for those bees to hatch out and give them a place to live without, turning into swarm preparation. And I'm pacing because I don't want to do that because it's a hell of a lot of work. And my employees don't want to do that because they know they're going to be the ones doing the work. So we're pacing and finally the weather turned and we put all the space on top and they just beautifully moved up into the space on top. When we do add the space underneath, we have to come back when the weather warms and put that space on top because that colony is moving upwards. You're not going to prevent that colony from swarming by her moving down. You're going to prevent it by her moving up. She wants to move up, we've got to promote that. So let's say the warm weather comes and these boxes are busting full of bees and I'm putting space up on top. So I throw my split boxes on top of these boxes of bees, and like I was saying, we have foundation honey, empty, honey, foundation. And I'm promoting that upward movement of that queen. And I'm telling her exactly what I want her to do. Mm-hmm. I want to take a full split off these big colonies, and that's going to be about 4 frames of brood. And I'm telling her what to do, so I give her 4 frames of empty space right in the center, right? So she's going to pretty much stovepipe up into that second box. She's going to lay out that box of brood for me to move back down. And then all I got to do is take that split away. The reason why I put the foundation on the outside is because inevitably I'm falling behind in my work, whether it's because I have too many hives or it's because the weather falls down on me or whatever reason. And when you have a big colony like this, it's got like 5 or 6 frames of brood down here, and let's say she's laid you out 4 frames of brood up there, and you get behind by a week and a half or whatever, and they all hatch out, and you got all these young bees inside this nest, and then they go hit the dandelions and bring in all this resource. They're going to swarm off on you. So with this foundation on the side, it just is a place to buy me time. It's just a place for these bees to drop all that energy and to keep their mind off swarming and just keep putting it towards developing out that nest. So usually by the beginning of my split, as I'm taking these boxes away, these foundations are hardly even touched. Midway through, they're just nicely getting on there. These center frames are just beautiful capped frames of splits of frames of brood. By the end of my splits, these guys are these packed full of honey yet. I'm like, holy crap, I'm walking the line, but that's why I do that. So May and June in my area is what I would consider my swarm season. They've come out of spring. This is a reproductive stage. You just see the growth in here. Just absolutely tremendous. So right about end of May into June, that's when I target for my split. So the split on my farm, you'd think the honey flow is the busiest, most stressful time. The split is probably the busiest, most stressful time in my honey farm anyways. If you work these hives too early, you just shock them and move them backwards. And if you split them too late, they're going to swarm off and you live in the trees. So my objective is to promote continual growth of these colonies as we harvest all these extra bees all the way through the spring. I just want to continually grow these colonies out. And when I first started my beekeeping business, I used to split my colonies. You used to go down and find the queen and then take the split away. It's a hell of a lot of work. I changed that. I remember a time very specifically, very vividly. I'm working through my colonies. I've got to make my splits. These colonies are exploding. I already did 200 colonies at that time. I have another 200 ahead of me. I'm going through, I have 200 queens sitting on my desk at home in the honey house waiting to be used. Dad's off to Winnipeg to pick up another 200 queens from being made to participate in my split. And I'm working through this colony and can't find the queen. Go through all 20 frames, can't find her, so go through it again, finally find her, make the split. It's not working. I'm looking at the forecast, and it's like 3 or 4 days ahead of me of cold weather. I'm not going to get my work done. I'm going to have all these queens sitting on my desk, all this investment, all these hives ahead of me that I can't split because it's taking me too much time to find that queen to get through. When I get into the next colony, sure enough, I can't find that queen. So I go through another 20 frames, and I finally find the queen and make my split. And I remember leaving the yard. I texted my buddy at that time. He had 1,200 colonies. And I said, "How are you doing this? How are you splitting your colonies? How are you getting all this work done?" And he said, "Well, you're spending too much time on your hives." And I just about texted back and said, no shit, Sherlock. So I left and I went to the next yard, and it's in the evening, and I figured, I'll try to get one more hive done. So I dive into that yard, and I can't find that damn queen again. So I close up the colony, I start driving home. I text my buddy again. I said, "No, how are you managing all this work?" And he told me, he texted back, he said, "Quit finding the queen." And I said, "What the hell is he talking about? I don't understand. I didn't know what he meant." So I drove home thinking about this the entire time. Got home, jumped in the shower, and the shower, I don't know about you, but the shower is where I do all my thinking. It's where I reflect on the day. I stand there in the hot water. It's terrible for the hot water, but I just stand and reflect on the day and think about thoughts and stuff. And it kind of come to me as, of course, quit finding the queen. Why am I spending all my time searching for the queen when I should be splitting that colony off? So with that, I put together kind of like a program and a process to kind of manage it split without spending so much time finding that queen. And I'll try to walk you through this process just to show you how I put it together. So I take the colony, so we got a colony here, and she's got 2 boxes full of brood. And we want to take that top box away as a split. Okay? So what I do is I take the top box, I put it up on top of the colony beside it, put it on the undercover so the bees can't boil at the bottom, right? I go down that bottom box and I count out my frames. And for me, I want my hives 4 frames of brood. That's the strength I want my colonies, capped brood. I always assess my colonies on capped brood. So I go down and I count out my 4 frames of brood. I put this funnel on top. Everybody wondering what the hell that is. It's like it's an old laundry tub I bought at Walmart. You cut the bottom out, made a frame. So it's a funnel. A funnel is what it is. Because what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take all these bees from the top, I'm going to shake them down to the bottom. I used to use an old box shell, but this is a little bit taller, it's easier to shake into, so it's just a funnel size. Frame by frame, I shake all the bees down to the bottom box, put them in the box beside, and then when this is all shaken down, I put this queen excluder over top of that bottom box. The second box goes back on top, and those bees will naturally migrate through that queen excluder, right? And I know that queen's going to be down there because I shook every single bee down to that bottom box. I then come around in a couple hours, or usually that evening, or sometimes I see nasty weather ahead and I got to get a lot of work done. We focus all our time on setting up the split, and then we can come around through the cool weather to take the splits. All we do is we basically strip off all the splits. We know that queen's down there. We've settled out the brood frames. We're taking these top boxes and we're just taking them. This is an easy loader here. I just throw pallets down in the yard. And I get the guys just to simply take these boxes, put it on the pallet, lift it onto the truck and out to the mating yard. And then I take these queen excluders off and I put a honey box on top. Okay. And the reason why I do that is because I want to continue that queen. I want to brood. We're right in the middle of the swarm season. We're taking a split. And that queen's still laying, upward laying, or brood laying. have all this swarm season we got to deal with. So I want to provide that queen with as much space as she wants during that time without swarming off on me, because I want to control that population so they don't swarm, but I want to maximize the bees in that box to be able to have those bees to bring this monster crop that's supposed to come in. So if we're not simply stripping the boxes off, taking the split, we're making nukes. So here's Carrie, she's my right-hand beekeeper. She's coming through the top and she's making up a bunch of nukes. So it's 2 brood frames and a honey frame and foundation and whatever. So we're just stripping all the surplus strength off and we're just making a shit ton of nukes. And we send them down into our mating yards, or if we buy imported queens, you can put a mated queen in there, that's no problem. I've switched more to a self-sustainable queen management program where I do all my queen rearing in-house now. So we'll drop a queen cell into each and every one of those splits and colonies. I'll be talking about this later this afternoon if you're interested. So the split's done. That bottom box is all settled out. The whole apiary is the same size. I have honey boxes up on top. That queen's going up there. She's happy. She has all the space she needs within that nest. And they're pretty much set up, ready for the main flow. So all that stress, all that work is done. The alfalfas, the clovers, are providing nourishment to my colonies at that time. So they're growing. They're really happy. A little bit of downtime for me because all this work is done. They're set up. Now we're just moving our yards out to the summer yards to collect honey. And everything's great. Until canola comes. Canola is our main flow. Everything back in Manitoba, everything in the Canadian prairies actually revolves around canola. This is our money maker. So as soon as the canola starts to bloom, it just so happens it starts blooming at the end of my swarming season. So right here at the end of the swarming season, right at this time, you notice the brood nest has pretty much achieved all she can do. It's leveled right out. And a mass of bees in those boxes. So right at this time, we're shaking these bees, shaking the queens. We're moving the queen from the top box, she's down there, down to the bottom, and we're putting excluders in. And I basically do it the same way. You take the split, we just come through the whole apiary, and we just basically shake all those bees from the top box down into the bottom box, and we put a queen excluder in. And then we put, instead of taking that as a split, we just put that back on top for that nest to hatch out. So right at this time, it's the end of June, going into July, school's out, and I have all these kids in town that are looking for a job, so they come up to the farm, they want a job, so I throw them, the bee suits and gloves, and I go, okay guys, let's go shake some bees. And it's really nice because even my daughter, I had my daughter work for me last year, and my oldest son wants to work for me this year, and it is because of these cell phones. We're not going to pay for the program for these cell phones. And none of the parents are going to pay for it either, so all these kids got to find a way to make money. So they're looking for a job, and it's absolutely brilliant. And the best thing about beekeeping is kids can't be on a phone with their gloves on. So I get the best of both worlds here. So anyways, these kids come and, they're capable. They can sure enough shake bees from a frame. So I set the yard up, we're shaking the bees down, we're putting excluders in. When we get behind, I maybe put a few boards just to help drive them down, quicken the process up. So this gets really busy. So the whole apiary is busting with bees, canola flows coming. As soon as that canola flows, just like that, these boxes instantly fill up with honey. It's like, we got to get these queens down to the bottom box right now and give these hives more space. Because if we're too laggy, we're going to be shaking heavy frames of nectar, and there'll be nectar shaking down on the bottom, and these frames are heavy, the kids' arms will get tired. And we got to get space on top because that second box is going to fill up, and we got to get space on top for them to fill up. So we shake all the bees down, we put the queen excluder in, we put those boxes back on top, and then we drop a third on immediately right away. So right at this time, after that queen's down here, Phoenix excluder's in, that brood in the second box, it's going to hatch out. It's going to hatch out, they don't hatch. I always say hatch. The eggs hatch, the bees emerge. But the bees will emerge from those frames, and then the colony is going to backfill that nest with nectar. So I've been just working April, 15, 18-hour days, long hours, trying to keep ahead of this, trying all this work to manage. I'm tired, you know. That's when I go to the lake. A little bit of family time. Because right about this time, I had this crew of kids coming in to help me with my work, of all these kids. And we need to add space on top. I don't have to be there for that. It doesn't take a genius to take a box and put it on top of a colony. So I leave, I'm gonna leave for a week. I tell my crew, I'm gone for a week. I want you guys to add fourths and fifths onto every hive within this apiary. I want you to mow every yard, because I don't want to mow a yard, so I get my kids to do that. And if it's raining, they're going to be building frames, or sorting foundation. All these jobs, I just have this list full of jobs. I don't have to be there. And it just allows me to get away and just take a breath, just a little bit of breather, just a little bit of reprieve from these bees. Because these hives, I don't know about you guys, but every one of my bees has a little wee bit. They just keep looking at me to keep me working. I got to get away from that, and that's the only way I can keep going in this business. So I do that by going to the lake, and it is ever nice. When I get back, we get busy. So after we put the queen excluders in, after we shake that queen down the bottom, we got to wait for at least 21 days. Because that box has to hatch out, you know, at least 21 days to allow that brood to emerge before we start harvesting. We don't want to bring that brood into the honey house. And I stage my apiary according to my capability of workload. So I have 1,500 hives. My facility is capable of extracting 500 hives a week. So I stage my apiary into threes. So the first 500 hives, I keep them tight. So I have them stacked up. They need more space, but I'm going to be at them right away to take the honey to give them more space. So I'm very conservative in the space I give them. The hives, that'll take a week before I get to them. I add a box. I have a box a week ago. These hives will fill a box in a week. So anything, the next week we're going through assessing. If they're filled up, we give them another box on top for space. Those ones stuck right in the end, you know, on that third week I'll get to them, I'll be really liberal with those guys, and I'll give a lot of those guys 2 boxes of space. Just trying to keep ahead of that flow, trying to gather absolutely every little bit of that nectar coming in to make sure they have space to store it from the colonies. So when we're going around, we're pulling honey. These boxes, you know, they can weigh up to 80 pounds each. It's really heavy. That's a lot of work. So what we do is we employ a method of pulling honey where we don't actually physically have to lift these boxes. And I bought an easy loader. And I remember a time back when we were pulling honey, we used to pull the boxes off. We either drive them down with fumes or we'd blow them out with blowers. It was a really heavy year. Really good honey flow. And again, I was standing in the shower thinking to myself, I'm tired, my back is sore, heavy flow. How am I going to keep doing this work and sustain myself, sustain my health without hurting myself? You know, without relying on my employees to come in to do all this treacherous work, lifting these heavy boxes. I'm standing there, I already have everything on pallets, I do everything with skidsters and everything, but it didn't relieve that awkward act of physically lifting those boxes off the hive. Like, how the hell do you do that? So I was standing in the shower thinking to myself, and it dawned on me, well, why don't we employ a lift? And then these nifty little skateboards. So what we do is we come around and we lift up our heavy boxes. So this is one of my guys here, he's lifting up boxes, and they just simply lift the stack. We slap in 2 empties, and then we put in a skateboard, and we put these boxes back on top. And what's going on is these bees are naturally cycling within their nest like this. They're always moving up and down, whether or not they're coming down and meet that queen because they want to gather some of that substance. But more importantly, these processor bees are cycling up and down because they're going to meet the forager bee, as the forager bee drops their payload to the processor bees to come up to the store, just so they can get back out in the yard and get some more nectar. It's more efficient this way. So these bees are cycling, continuously cycling. So we come through, we lift up these boxes, we slap in this bee escape, put them back up on top. Foragers come in, drop the load to these processor bees. They migrate down, get the payload, and they can't get back up here because they can't get through this screen. For some reason, they can get down through the cones, but they can't get themselves back up. So they migrate themselves down through the screen, they get the payload, and then they just carry on their work like nothing's happened, filling these empty boxes down the bottom here. So we leave these escapes on for about 3 days, 2 days, 3 days. By that time, all the bees have migrated down, come through with their crew, and with the loader again, we just simply come and we just strip off the entire yard. Take all these boxes full of honey without bees in them, load them onto the truck. The guys just work all day swinging this iron back and forth. And we bring the boxes back to the honey house. Everything's on pallets. Drop them into my hot room. My hot room is, I keep it about 30 degrees Celsius. Warm honey flows, as you know, warm honey flows at home. So I want to warm that honey up. I have floor heat, right? Heated cement pad so that warmth just travels from the floor up and just warms absolutely every little bit of honey in these boxes. I let them sit in here for about 2 or 3 days because there's always stragglers come in. There's always these annoying bees that are just lingering in these boxes. And they get attracted to that window just like a magnet. They go to that window and we just gather them up, throw them in a little box, put another queen cell in there, make another colony. It works beautifully. But this hot room, I have about 2,000 boxes in here, and the guys just every day, I run the honey house every day, they just keep pulling from one side of the room, I keep adding to the other side, and it just runs in a cycle. There's some of you guys have small hive beetle here. We don't have small hive beetles, too cold up in Canada, which allows me to be able to stockpile a bunch of supers like this. So I run a 60 frame cowan extractor and a Cookson Beetles wax separator. So I run about 3 or 4 kids in here. Every day they're pulling out 275 or 350 boxes of honey, depending on how heavy the boxes are. So we're pulling out probably 18 to 22 drums a day. And I'm in the yards every day where I need to be. I'm in the yards, that's where I make the money. So I bring 2, sometimes I bring 3, depending on how many guys show up to work. But 2 or 3 guys come out with me. I have 2 or 3 guys in the honey house. And our honey flow starts July and it typically runs right to September. It's starting to run shorter now. We're starting to run at a flow beginning of August now. Last year, beginning of August, we just seemed to lose that last half of our honey flow. But on a good year, it runs to September. And yeah, producing roughly 450 grams of honey. So I'll just quickly go through this. At the end of the season, we're stripping up all the boxes and we use the escapes, we push them all down to the bottom box again. And they get pretty tight down there. And you have to appreciate that these boxes, the queen, instead of making her nest like this between the 2, she's down in that bottom box now. And she pretty much uses that entire box to fill full of brood. So I'm pulling out frames, I'm pulling like 8 or 9 frames of brood down the bottom box. And you can appreciate that leaves absolutely no space for food. So we have to be very careful that when we're pulling off these honey boxes, we don't send them into starvation. So you see there's lots of resource available, they're nice and happy. On a single box, we have the excluder that holds that queen down and pushes all that honey up. And it's brilliant because then I can take all that honey away to harvest, and then I just come back and provide them with food. So I gotta make sure that once I take away their food, I give them syrup back to feed on. These are my nukes. And it's even more exaggerated when I confine them to 6 frames instead of 10. And there's absolutely no food down there for the queen. So I take those boxes away. I got to be pretty smart to get that honey or syrup back on them. I do it with open feeding, and I do it with pail feeding. And as soon as those boxes are stripped off, I'm putting feed out just to give them enough to be able to sustain themselves. I'm not bulking them at this time. I'm just trying to provide them the food to allow them to continue to develop out that nest I'm also doing that with, patties. So I'm feeding them, just giving them a jolt of protein just to help complement that natural stuff coming in. I'm not trying to replace that pollen coming in, I'm just trying to complement and provide everything they need to be able to develop out that nest. So we're feeding and we're focusing on treatments at this time also. I'll skip through this. So we're right back at the end of the season. We take the honey boxes off and we're preparing that nest for winter. As you can appreciate, that queen is decreasing her egg laying. She pretty much gives up all the space within that box. And I take advantage of that by bulking that nest up with syrup. So as that queen finishes out the year, our bees are whipped to the seasons up in Canada, for us anyways. They're very defined, so as they move from summer to fall, she starts decreasing her egg laying as she sets up that winter nest, right? Or as the bees are going to set up the winter nest. And as she gives up that space, I'm following behind the syrup. And about September is when I focus on bulk feeding and plugging that nest out with syrup to help them shut down. So I'm weighing all these colonies. My target is about 95 pounds per single, and that'll get my hives till April. So I pack these guys right full. Before I bring them inside, I started giving them a shot of oxalic acid. These hives are naturally going broodless, and those mites can't hide on me anymore. So I control my mites in the spring with Apivars, Amitraz, and it gets me till fall. And then once those bees are exposed, they can't hide. I give them a shot of oxalic, and it just wipes them all out. But you can't have any brood. If you do too soon, if there's brood in this colony, you're going to miss a lot of mites. So for this to work, it's got to be a broodless nest. So after all that work's done, I go around with my easy loader, pick up all my colonies, put them onto my truck. And I like to do this when it's not snowing, because when it snows, it makes a hell of a lot more work. Just dealing with snow and slippery pallets and boxes and pallets frozen to the ground is just another layer of work. So I try to get it done before it snows. It doesn't always happen. With my forklift, stack them up in the shed, and I close the door and I turn out the lights. And that brings me to the end of a year perspective in a prairie beekeeping operation. Thank you.